Metro Manila mayors have ordered a 2-week closure of gyms, spas, and internet cafes in a bid to bring down new cases and curb the spread of the more infectious variants. The IATF likewise ordered a 2-week suspension of religious activities in the metro, just a few days before the Holy Week. But a Manila bishop slams the order, saying the church isn't bound to follow a directive for which they weren't even consulted. Malacanang threatens to shut down churches who will defy the government's closure order. The NTF says they'd rather settle the issue peacefully and urged compliance from church leaders. President Duterte is planning to speak with the Chinese embassy in Manila over the issue of Chinese militia presence at the Julian Felipe Reef. Malacanang says there's nothing that can't be discussed among friends. And Oceanographer Deo Onda makes history as the first Filipino to reach the 3rd deepest point in the world. Fast, focused, and fearless. Here's everything you need to know as you jumpstart your day. I'm Charles Lejano. High-risk businesses such as gyms, spas, and internet cafes will be shut down for 2 weeks. This after COVID-19 variants were detected in all cities of the metro. Greg Gregorio with the details.
More than 5,800 new COVID-19 cases were reported on Tuesday, the 5th highest single-day tally this year. The Health Department reiterates that aside from the public's poor compliance to minimum health protocols, the spread of variants also contributes to the surge in infections. The agency reports that 5% of 4,310 samples subjected to genome sequencing are positive for the B117 or UK variant. Meanwhile, 4% tested positive for the B1351 or the South African variant, and only 1 case of the Brazilian variant has been confirmed so far. Health Secretary Francisco Duque III said the variants have already spread across Metro Manila.
Pareho po ito ay nakitaan sa NCR at saka din po sa CAR at pati ang returning overseas Filipinos ay nakitaan din pong malaking bilang.
With this, the government has decided to shut down gyms, spas, and internet cafes for 2 weeks. Officials are reiterating the need for compliance to health protocols in workplaces and other establishments. These include the maximum 30% venue capacity in business places and 50% in outdoor restaurants. The Labor Department warns business owners and companies of fines and other penalties for violation.
This is now part of the Oslo and its IRR, which is the Republic Act 1158 and the DOLE DO 198, and there are administrative fines that are daily fines for non-compliance.
The Trade Department says the restrictions may be extended if the uptrend in cases continues.
We do not know what will be discussed in the IATF. We do not know if they will extend it or add more restrictions. Hindi po natin alam. Kaya it's a warning to everybody, both business and consumer, to please comply.
As for the vaccines, the pending master listing of recipients among other priority sectors have yet to be finalized.
And the definitions po of the essential sectors is something that the recovery cluster headed by NEDA will be releasing very soon.
This comes as the government plans to simultaneously inoculate healthcare and other frontline workers, senior citizens, and people with comorbidities. For News 5, Greg Gregorio, we are One News.
Some Catholic bishops seem to be defying the government's directive on banning religious gatherings for 2 weeks within the bubble. Mobile journalist Jacob Lazaro gives us a front seat to the story.
Every year, Jonathan travels from Bulacan to the Quiapu Church as part of her Lenten pilgrimage. This year, with the new protocols in place, she wonders if the church will even be open.
Malungkot kasi traditional na since yung bata kami. Talagang every year yan, kasama pa ng mga parents namin. Talagang iniikot namin ng lahat ng ganitong simbahan, yung matatandang simbahan.
On Monday, the Interagency Task Force, or the IATF, banned all mass gatherings, including religious gatherings, to stem the rising cases of COVID-19. But the order comes just a week before the Lenten season, the holiest time in the Catholic calendar. And some of the bishops are defying the order. Manila Archdiocese Administrator Bishop Roderick Pabilio says the church was not bound to follow a rule where the church was not even consulted.
So diyan mali na sila. At hindi dapat tayo sumunod sa ganyang pamamalakad na walang konsultasyon at it somehow breaks the separation of church and state.
Caloocan Bishop Pablo David asked why church services were banned when gyms and spas were initially allowed to operate. David says the order also violates religious freedom. Bishop Abilio says Manila churches will still hold services, but at 10% capacity.
Actually, we restrict ourselves to 10%. No, because they themselves, they said that there should be no mass gatherings. I don't even know what kind of mass gatherings those are. Why do they say only religious activities should have no mass gatherings? What about in the malls?
Pabilio added that if the government thought it important to give the economy some breathing space, it should also allow for the public's spiritual needs.
They tend to say that because of the spread of the virus, but are not the malls also part of those? No, so why do they allow them to the malls, the restaurants, and not to the church? And we always say that the church activities are essential activities. They are not economic activities. We have also a spiritual need.
Pala spokesperson Harry Roque said religious freedom wasn't the issue. Roque added that the government can shut down the churches if it needs to, but hoped it would not come to that.
Ang defiance po ng IATF resolution is not covered by separation of church and state. What is covered is the freedom to believe and the freedom not to endorse a religion. Pero in the exercise of police powers, we can order the churches closed. Wag sana pong dumating doon, Bishop Abilio.
Religion is deeply embedded in the Filipino culture and is just as important as our health and the economy. So the most important thing is that we learn how to balance them. I'm Jacob Lazaro and we are One News.
The CBCP maintains that Bishop Pabilio's statement wasn't meant to incite defiance of the government restriction on mass gatherings. In an interview with the chiefs, Father Jerome Siciliano said the bishop's statement was just, quote, an expression of his religious right. He added that the Catholic Church is actively following IATF measures on mass gatherings.
There is no defying of government policy. The bishop is very much compliant with government policy. So it was just an expression of a religious right. We are not opening our churches and imposing on the people to come to us during Holy Week celebrations, but under the principle of subsidiarity, it's the people who will decide whether they need spiritual sustenance during these days of the Holy Week. Even the bishop canceled yung pagtitipon sana ng mga pare ngayong Holy Wednesday for the Chrism Mass. So ang daming pare na pupunta sana dyan, but because of the prevailing pronouncement of the IATF, sabi ng obispo, na hindi natin gagawin yan kasi nga merong pagbabawal nitong mass gathering. No, there was no define.
The CBCP also slammed the IATF's rationale behind the closure, saying the latter should have based its decision on past and realistic events and cited the lack of COVID-19 surges during religious celebrations.
Sana nga yung sana naging desisyon ng IATF became more rational. Tapos nangyari na nga yung Pasko, nangyari na yung pagdiriwang ng piyesta ng Quiapo, wala naman napaulat na nag-spike yung coronavirus dahil nagbukas yung simbahan. Sana na-consider yun, So parang ang nangyari dito, the IATF made a decision based on assumptions. But it's not based on realistic event that transpired. Nag-rely lang sila sa kanilang assumption na, baka makadagdag pa ito. So kaya isarado na natin payagan.
NTF Deputy Chief Implementer Vince Dizon insists that the ban on religious gatherings was recommended by experts. In an interview with The Big Story, Dizon said mass gatherings, including religious gatherings, are the most dangerous situations for Filipinos in terms of spreading COVID-19 infections. Malacanang already threatened to shut down churches yesterday. if they insist on holding masses amid the surge of COVID-19 cases in the metro and its neighboring provinces. But Dizon said the government would rather avoid a forcible lockdown of churches and urged the church heads and the public to celebrate virtual masses instead.
Hindi naman po natin gustong mangyari yon. Pero kailangan din pong ipatupad ng Estado ang mga pinrescribe niyang mga regulasyon. At ngayon po, klaro po ang regulasyon, hindi po pwede talaga ang mass gathering. Dalawang linggo lang naman po, kaya lang po tatama po talaga ng Holy Week. So humihingi po talaga tayo ng paumanhin at pasensya sa lahat ng ating mga kababayan, pati na rin sa ating mga obispo at ng ating mga pare na sana po magsama-sama na lang po tayo dito at mag-virtual po muna tayo.
Meanwhile, another Catholic church leader is emphasizing the role of religion and spirituality during the time of the pandemic. In an interview with 1PH's at Totoo Lang, SVD Provincial Superior Father Jerome Marquez explained that allowing the faithful to express their spirituality helps them cope with the impact of the pandemic on their daily lives.
Hindi mo pwedeng ihiwalay yung spiritual na bahagi ng pagharap natin sa pandemya ito na nangangailangan tao ng makakapitan. Hindi mo makapitan ang vaccine, wala pa. Hindi mo makapitan ang yung bulsa dahil kumonti na ang laman o wala na itong kayang ipantustos pa. Pero naghahanap ang tao ng konkreto sa buhay niya na makakapitan. Kaya napakahalaga sapagkat alam ng tao ang kanyang kahinaan at ang tanging niyang kanlungan at matatakbuhan ay ang Diyos na sinasamahan tayo sa mahirap na paglalakbay na ito.
However, Marquez noted that many Catholics and Christians tend to forget that religion isn't all about the rituals.
Ang rehelyong buhay din ay hindi lang naandun sa ritual, kundi konkretong naglilingkod sa kapwang hihirapan, wala ng katarungan, nilapastangan. Lahat ng ito ay kaloob sa diwa ng totoong Semana Santa na hinahanga din kahit ng sinumang obispo at pare at sinumang mananampalataya.
Here are other stories making headlines around the nation. Treatment czar Leopoldo Vega is appealing to LGUs to expand their temporary treatment and monitoring facilities. This as hospitals are now being overwhelmed with COVID-19 patients. Vega notes that about 60% of COVID and isolation beds are now occupied, while ICU beds are at about 73 to 76% capacity. Hospital groups say they need reinforcements and not a timeout. The Philippine Hospital Association says health-related agencies should deploy more health workers to augment the country's COVID-19 response. This as several medical frontliners are either too exhausted or have already tested positive for the disease due to continuous exposure. The PHA is also seeking the assistance of the military and the police, who have their own fleet of nurses and other medical personnel to help them man the front lines. President Duterte plans to speak with Chinese Ambassador to the Philippines, Huang Tilian, to discuss the purported presence of no less than 200 Chinese vessels at the Julian Felipe Reef. According to presidential spokesperson Harry Roque, the president is confident that this issue will be resolved quickly, but did not delve into details on when this conversation will take place. Meanwhile, the Foreign Affairs Department has demanded the withdrawal of said Chinese vessels from Julian Felipe Reef, part of the country's EEZ, saying China is blatantly infringing on Philippine sovereignty and jurisdiction. Currently, there are still 138 militia vessels moored in the reef. And this just in, the second batch of donated Sinovac vaccines has arrived in the country this morning. 400,000 new doses of the China-made vaccine arrived in the NAIA after a PAL aircraft picked up the vaccines from Beijing. Several Philippine officials welcomed the arrival of the shots together with Chinese Ambassador to the Philippines, Huang Tilian. And a Filipino scientist makes history as oceanographer Deo Florence Onda successfully reached the Earth's third deepest spot. The UP Marine Science Institute announced on Facebook that Onda's team has descended over 10,000 meters to the Emden Deep located in the Philippine Trench. He was with American Victor Verscovo, the current record holder for the deepest manned descent in the Marianas Trench last 2019, and Onda is the first and only Filipino who has dived into the Emden Deep.
That's bottom. Congrats.
That's how the day is shaping up to be. Join us later at 10 a.m. as we monitor the day's biggest stories from sunrise to sundown. You can also catch One News on Signal Play. Just register for a free account at www.signalplay.com so you can stream One News live anytime, anywhere. I'm Charles Lejano. Mask on, wash hands, and stay safe, Philippines. We're One News.
Diyan po kayo